And I would like to introduce our distinguished speaker, the expert today. He is Dr. Shambhu Nath Jha, who obtained his MSc degree in chemistry from Delhi University in the year 1986. And he received his PhD degree from University of Bombay in the year 1999 in the field of X-ray spectroscopy. He joined Bhabha Atomic Research Center in the year 1989 after graduating from 32nd batch of BARC Training School, that is Bhabha Atomic Research Center Training School. After that, he moved to Indus Synchrotron Radiation Source Facility, Raja Ramanna Center for Advanced Technology, Indore, in the year 2001 for Beamline Development Project. Currently, he is leading the Beamline Development and Application section of Physics group in BARC. His current research interest focuses on using X-ray absorption spectroscopy and photoelectron spectroscopy in material science and synchrotron radiation-based beamline development. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Shambhu Nath Jha to deliver his lecture. Thank you, sir. Yes, Dr. Jha, you can start now.
Yeah. So share a screen and then.
Yes.
So my screen is visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, it is. It is.
Okay. So now I do F5. Yeah. So good morning, all of you. And it is really very nostalgic moment for me to be associated with this AN College Atal Faculty Development Program and to share my experience, whatever I have learned, and all this credit goes to my college, AN College, which led the foundation as an intermediate of science and then BSc Chemistry honors. And from there, I moved to, I started my career in Bhabha Parmanu Kendra in X-ray spectroscopy. So that's how I landed from chemistry to X-ray spectroscopy. Okay, so today I will be introducing here basically the synchrotron radiation, which is basically a fascinating light source, which has basically revolutionized the scientific studies in variety of fields, which was not possible or which we could not imagine because of the non-availability of such sources. Of course, the science behind this source is very old. I mean, we know that any charged particle, when accelerates or decelerates, so it emits the electromagnetic radiation. So it is not that something it is new, which has because of which the synchrotron radiation is being used. But the main issue was the technology behind this. So technology was not there. In fact, the first it was observed in 1947 around, but it took almost more than a decade to start the first generation of source. So this is the plan of my talk. So I'll just introduce the synchrotron radiation source, what it is, and what is the technology behind this, and what are the special properties, of course, which makes it so special among all other sources, and then what advancement it has taken in this field. Then I will come to the applications of synchrotron radiation source, and of course I will showcase the various beamline facilities at the only synchrotron source in India, which is at Raja Ramanna Center for Advanced Technology, Indore. So what is synchrotron radiation? Basically, it is a source of broad spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, which is extending from infrared to X-ray wavelength. So under one machine, you get the full electromagnetic radiation with this synchrotron. And it offers a very unique properties, which is not attainable from any other laboratory source. And so that's why it has placed a unique position among all the available laboratory sources. But it has some demerit that it is available only through a dedicated national user facility. I mean, it is not that a common man's cup. I mean, so we have to depend on some national facility like our Indus, or in the Europe like Electra, or in Japan Spring 8, like that. But there are advantages, like it is I mentioned that it is like a scientific mall. I mean, we go to mall and whatever we wish we find in under one roof. So here also, this is a scientific mall. Any technique you name or any brainwave, it comes to your mind, okay, I want to apply this technique and just to see what happens. So that kind of facility or advantage is there. Okay, so what is how it is emitted? So basically, SR is emitted when a charged particle, and namely the electron, mostly is moving at a relativistic speed, and follow a curved trajectory by employing a bending magnet. So, for example, here I just apply this magnet, and because of that, this there is a centripetal acceleration. There is change in the direction of the electron. And as soon as there is a change in direction, I mean, there is change in acceleration. So there is by physics principle, there will be emission of a electromagnetic radiation. And this radiation is called synchrotron radiation, with the condition it will only be called synchrotron radiation when the velocity of this charged particle is almost close to velocity of light, but less than the velocity of light. So normal, what we see, a normal radiation, electromagnetic radiation due to acceleration, when the V is much less than C, then you see kind of, this is the picture where it shows that it is isotropic in nature. For example, the radiation which is coming from sun, it is a very, like synchronous radiation, it is very, it has a continuum spectrum. Everything is there in the atmosphere, but it is isotropic. So the electromagnetic radiation which is coming in the case of when B is much less than C, it is isotropic. But the moment this B approaches the velocity of light, the whole radiation which is radiated in the 4 pi solid angle, everything is confined as a thin strip. So kind of a ribbon. If you imagine the ribbon which you use, so the ribbon, in the form of ribbon, the lights is emitted tangentially with the velocity direction. So basically, the electrons are so finally the story starts from the normal electrons source. Like you have a bulb. Earlier we had a bulb. Now of course we get LED light. So it starts with the electron source like any gun, and then it is accelerated in a LINAC, then further accelerated to the required energy in a booster, and then injected and stored in the storage ring. So that is how the source is produced in nutshell. So basically, the delay, although physics was much older, but then it took time because of the technology in vacuum science, because this requires a 10 to the minus 10 or better millibar, 10 to the minus 10 millibar vacuum to make the electron orbit in a storage ring. And of course, the required power supply, precision power supply, which is required in the ppm level, the kind of accuracy of those magnet power supply. Okay. So SR technology basically has 5 major components. So first is, as I told you, the source of electron, which can be electron gun, linear accelerator, or microtron. For example, this is the Indus picture scheme. So you can see this is the microtron here, 20 MeV microtron source. And then second is the booster ring. So this is, for example, a booster ring, which can have energize the electron from 20 MeV to 450 or 550 MeV, depending upon the requirement. And the next is then called storage ring. So third component is storage ring. So for example, this is one storage ring. This is the first synchrotron source of India. There is for UV region. It's called Indus 1. The other is the Indus 2. So this is another storage ring which gives in the hard X-ray region where the electron is at 2.5 giga electron volt. And the fourth component is the RF, radio frequency power supply. So basically, as you know, when these are you see the various bending magnets, these bending magnets which makes the electron move in a circular path. So there, wherever there is a bending, so tangential to that direction, there is a emission of electromagnetic radiation. So in that process, electron will lose energy, and in turn, it will hit the vacuum chamber. So to avoid that, that's why you have to energize the, you have to kick the electron with a suitable energy so that it maintains the at 2.5 GeV, for example, in the case of Indus 2, and 450 mega electron volt in the case of Indus 1. So and then finally the beam which is coming out tangentially is fed to the beam lines. So this is the these are the major components, and where the beam lines is the place where we conduct the experiment. We'll tell more about this in the next slide. So of course these are the some subsystems. So you could see here, so these are the dipole magnet, and these are the quadrupole and sextupole magnet in this whole storage ring. So you can see all these magnets are made indigenously, totally indigenous. Atmanirbhar Bharat effort already it was going on, and DAE has a logo, I mean motto, that we should make whatever possible high technology thing in-house. So you can see in collaboration with the Godrej, these magnets were made. So this is for bending the path of the electron. Then quadrupole magnet is used for focusing the electron. And so once beam is coming out, it will get diverged. So quadrupole is used to focus, and then sextupole used to further the correction of aberrations. It is like anyway wave optics. So electron also is considered kind of like optics. We use various lenses and all. And this is a section of the Indus 2 storage ring where you can see the here this is the RF cavity for which is placed in the storage ring for replenishing the lost energy due to electromagnetic radiation. And these are the different magnets. This is the dipole, and this is the quadrupole and sextupole magnets. Now coming to beam line. So what is beam line? The beam line is basically, it has three major components, and which is called, first is called front end, an optical hutch, and the experimental hutch. And this is the concrete wall, shielding wall it is called, because this electron which is at very high energy, and when it emits radiation, it is hazardous to human being as well as instruments also. I mean, like for example, cables, everything, it can get damaged. So that's why the front end is device, which is basically interface between the synchrotron source here and the experimental station. So with a purpose, so that to transport the beam with the desired quality and quantity. What quality means, what is the kind of resolution, what is the size and the flux. So all this, and range, energy range, whether you want soft X-ray or infrared or X-ray, so like that. So you can see here, so this is the source, synchrotron source, then it is fed, so this portion is front end, and front end basically nothing but a device consists of various gate valves, fast acting shutter, safety device, everything, so that to protect the storage ring as well as to protect the users who are using this beam in the experimental area. So this is the beam line, which consists of the optics with a mirror and monochromator, then sample chamber. This is data acquisition system. So in nutshell, so beam line is required for safely conducting the experiment with desired quality of photons for the respective experiment. So this is the just a section of the Indus 2 experimental hall, and in this section you can see there are three beam lines. So this is X-ray absorption beam line. This is another X-ray absorption beam line. This is a microfabrication lithography beam line, and this is imaging beam line. So this is the area where users are allowed, and this is this barricade you see behind this. These are the 3-meter concrete wall, and inside this the front end and storage ring is situated, and beam is tapped all along the tangential direction from the hole, from all and then the beam lines are made. So this house, you can see, this is called hutch, and this hutch is lead shielded. I mean, so that no radiation comes out, any scattered radiation should not come outside in this area. So while doing the experiment, this door is closed and interlocked. so nobody can go inside. If somebody tries to go inside, the safety shutter will be closed and no beam will be allowed to bring to the experimental station. So far we have seen the production and how it is produced, the technology behind the production of synchronization. Now let us focus on some of the terminology which are associated with the synchronization, normally which we don't associate with any other normal other sources. So first foremost thing is that it has a broad spectrum, as I told you in the beginning. So you can get from anything from infrared to X-ray. This is the kind of continuum you get. And so you have a kind of a freedom of atomic sensitivity. So you can tune your energy of excitation energy to a particular atomic binding energy. And then it has a high flux. So because of as I told you, because of the relativistic effect, and the whole isotropic radiation is confined to a very narrow cone. And this narrow cone is so less. It is in a millirad order. So everything you can imagine, like you focus the whole isotropic radiation in a small cone, and so it has a very less divergence. And of course, it has a very less source size. So because of this, there is a term which is talked about. It's called brilliance, or also it is called spectral brightness. So basically, as I told you, it has narrow divergence, so it is highly collimated. Photon beam is generated from a small source area, and therefore it has a very high spectral resolution we can think of, which is not possible in normal laboratory source. So brilliance is defined as a photons per second per millimeter square in I think that is per unit area and per unit solid angle, which is unit is millirad square and per unit bandwidth. So bandwidth is defined here, for example. So this you take a small delta h nu, of the portion. So this per unit bandwidth, what is the brilliance? This is how it is, nomenclature is defined, and this is used for comparison for different sources in this community. And this source also has a very high stability because this is it is a free electron. It is not coming from any solid target like in X-ray tube. You bombard with a cathode electron on the anode material like tungsten or anything. So the electron is moving in a vacuum chamber. So the stability of the source is also very, very, in the range of, you can say, sub-micron level. So you can think of nano imaging because of this high stability application you can think of. Then it has a natural polarization property, and it is polarized linearly in the plane of the electron orbit. The orbit in which the electron is circulating, and also it has circular polarization above the plane of the orbit. So this also leads to many advantages, like in many cases, for example, in the Compton scattering experiment or X-ray fluorescence experiment, we can enhance the singularity to noise ratio because the background will be almost zero. And also it can lead to another technique that is called X-ray magnetic circular dichroism. For any, let us say, magnetic material, we'll see later. And then also it has a pulse time structure. See, because the electrons are moving in a pulse and it is taking a round. For example, Indus 2, it is a 270 meter circumference. So whatever time it takes to take a round, so it gives one pulse. Then second again pulse. So the time the taken to take one turn will give rise to pulse structure. And so the pulse length is down to tens of picoseconds, and therefore it allows the resolution of processes on the same time scale. So basically, dynamic studies during any reaction can be studied. This, for example, nowadays in the advanced synchrotron sources in Spring Gate and APS in the US, people are basically making a molecular movie. What are the transition, how molecules, let us say some reaction is taking place. So we know initial and final products. What is happening in between, that also you can mimic, with this source because of the time structure. And as I told you earlier also, this is also unique advantage that it is produced in a clean environment, because I told you the vacuum chamber the vacuum is of the order of 10 power minus 10 millibar. So you can imagine, so there is no trace of any contamination. So it is free from any contamination. Unlike the, for example, if you imagine the X-ray tube in the laboratory source, so you will have always a contamination due to your cathode and anode material. So it will be superimposed on the continuum of the X-ray tube. Okay. Now the advancement in the technology, the synchrotron source not only is produced from bending magnet, which is of course is mandatory for making the electron move in a circular path, and this obviously emits the light, which is called synchronous radiation. So, but apart from this, see, scientists are always curious to have more and more brighter source, and that demand comes from your unique idea of performing a specific, very novel experiment, and that gives the urge to have another advanced technology, and that is called insertion devices. So basically, as you saw in the one of the picture in the industrial ring, so there are dipoles, and in between there is a gap, and there is straight section. So electron from the bending path. So in that straight section, some structure of the magnet different from bending magnet is introduced. So basically, to tailor the spectrum for your experimental needs. Suppose we want very high bright, you are not satisfied with whatever brightness is available bending magnet. So many people will say bending magnet is now outdated. Okay, but for many of them it is not. It is still very useful. So in that case, so people for like I told you, for if you want to do very dilute samples, or you want to do very imaging of nanomaterial. So for such studies, or let us say macromolecular crystallography for drug design application, all this, then battery in the energy storage device, all these things. So what we do, we introduce a array of alternating magnets in between the two dipole magnets. And this gives rise to a very coherent kind of light source. It is called, this device is called either wiggler or undulator, depending upon what is the strength of this magnet. The magnet strength of magnet is poorer than bending magnet, then it is called undulator. If it is comparable to bending magnet, then it is called a wiggler. So wiggler gives rise to basically harder X-rays. Suppose we get 20 keV, suppose you want to now get 40 keV. So with the use of wiggler, we can get from the same storage ring, we get hard X-ray. Whereas undulator is used mainly to peak the brightness at certain wavelength. So let us say I want 5 keV, at 5 keV, some 3-4 order of magnitude, brightness should increase. So then we can use undulator. And then there are a variety of undulator. I'm not going in detail here, just to make you familiar, so you remember some terminology. So there is not a black box for you. So as I told you, this technology has evolved from 1960s. In fact, 1947 first it was observed. So therefore the people talk of various generations in the synchronization technology, and it has so far 4 generations. And the first generation is called, which is basically due to parasitic facilities. I mean, the first one, it was observed as a nuisance. People were doing the high particle energy experiment, and that time there was a nuisance due to this radiation. So, and then second generation came, which was dedicated synchrotron radiation facility with bending magnet source only. And so this was second generation. For example, our Indus 1 synchrotron source in Indore is second generation. But in third generation, what happens? They have introduced now insertion devices that I introduced you, either undulator or a wiggler. Then more than 3 to 7 times there is an increase in brilliance than the second generation source. So Indus 2 is basically third generation source, where we have a undulator and wiggler. Undulator already operational, wiggler is under design stage. And then comes fourth generation, which is the state-of-the-art facility in the various advanced countries. In fact, our department also now proceeding in terms of this developing indigenously fourth generation source, which will be around 6 GeV energy. So 6 GeV machine with the free electron laser kind of facility, the peak brilliance is further high, then more than 3 to 10 times higher than the third generation. So can you imagine what a, I mean, the explosion has taken place in this field, and it has happened because of the urge of the scientists to do the more novel experiments, more advanced experiments. That's why this is science-driven projects. So this is a scenario, see, just to make you feel that how the advancement in the X-ray source has enormously increased the brilliance. So you can see 1890s when the SEAL tube was there during the discovery of that Röntgen X-rays, and from there we have slightly increased. And so this is a brilliance y-axis. So you can see hardly 10⁸ the brilliance is there with even with the advanced rotating anode. And then it came the first generation source, bending magnet. See, we have come to around 10⁻14. Then third generation with Wiggler undulator, we have reached up to this level. So you see 10⁻20 and so. And with the free electron laser, see around 10 in today's scenario, we get almost 10⁻28. So this is really a mind-blowing experiment which one can think of. And this is the graph which shows the comparison in between the various source. I mean, bending magnet, Wiggler, and undulator. So you can see this is the normal, the yellow one, the normal bending magnet curve source. Now, when we introduce with a Wiggler high magnetic field, so see here, for example, this is in the keV log scale. So this is from 10 keV. So from 10 keV, the flux is going down sharply. So I want to increase the flux further in the hard X-ray region. So we put a Wiggler, and then you see whole thing has shifted towards up to around 90 keV. So we can think of exciting uranium, for example, 100 keV or so. So now further, if you go to undulator, so there is a jump from 10⁻15 to 10⁻ almost 19 undulator, and with the free electron, we go somewhere here. So because of this so unique property, so there are more than 50 light sources which has been developed all over the world, and many countries have more than 10 sources, such sources, like US and Europe. And you can see the pie chart here. So kind of experiments people are doing, and the maximum in the pie chart you can see from the bio and life science, which is based on the R&D on the this macromolecular studies or the bio, I mean, development of new medicine, development of virus. All these things takes a maximum portion of this science, and then followed by the material science. And then, of course, physics, chemistry, and other geoscience are being used. So this is our synchrotron source map in this globe. We are here. The two sources are there. And so, if you summarize, what are the applications? So you can see crystal structure identification can be done in materials. I mean, without knowing anything detail about the crystal structure, we can find out, like in the case of any drug or a medicine, we can find out the structure of proteins and which have large molecule site, which is not possible with the laboratory source. Then it can reveal the chemical environment and composition in materials and minerals with very less concentration. Then it can find out the porosity and fracture of synthetic and natural materials, including rocks. So it has application in geology, and then microfabrication, drug delivery and drug development, biomedical imaging, and then cutting a research on soils and fertilizer. This is also very important studies being carried out using the synchrotron source. So this also is very relevant to our country for food supply chain. And also there is a strong research group on energy storage and alternate energy sources, which is also important for our country also in aerospace industrial research, and also leads to very advanced scientific discoveries, which one can imagine using this source. Okay, so now I'll just like to have one just movie around 3-4 minutes, which our department had made for National Science Day this year. So in nutshell, it will just give you again the feeling what is the synchrotron source and what the application. So let us see if it starts. Yeah. Okay. So now I come to the reflection part. So to concept, give a overall overview of the what are the applications possible. So that can be just understood by this view graph, where I have just shown that how X-ray interacts with the matter, and that gives rise to various techniques which can be used for application of synchronization. So from synchronous source, when it shines on any material, so what we can have, the immediate thing we can see that it can get absorbed, and so that's why it leads to the absorption spectroscopy, or it can be useful for imaging purposes. And then it can have also either scattered from the material, from the electrons in the material. So it can give rise to a structural probe to probe at a nanometer scale length. And of course, the diffraction is well known. Anyway, diffraction can be done to define the structure. And then, of course, we can use this for reflectivity. So we can find out some optical constants or determine the optical property of the material. And this also can be used for imaging, which, with application on lithography, or that is called microfabrication. And so these are all based on the photon. If you use the detector for photon counting, so you can use all this technique, I mean the scattering interactions. And of course, if we have along with this scattering, it also, the energy is so high, the electron can be ejected out from the material, and so the photo emission comes out. So a study of photo emission also can be done. And if it gets de-excited, so we can study the fluorescence of the coming out due to the de-excitation. And so we can find out the composition, or we can do the microanalysis. So based on this, the various techniques can be categorized under broadly 3 categories. So first is the spectroscopy, and it can have various subcategories like low energy, soft energy, X-ray, hard X-ray. Then it can have optics or a meteorology kind of study or reflectivity. And then technique can be based on scattering. So it can be again subdivided, the hard X-ray diffraction. It can be either of energy dispersive or angle dispersive. It can be specially dedicated for macromolecular. Then it can have all hard X-ray scattering or soft X-ray scattering. And of course, then it can be also categorized in the imaging, which can be again further subdivided in the various energy region. Okay, so this is again a familiar view graph you have seen already in this video. And so I do not repeat again this. Okay, so what are the beamline available at INDUS 2? So Total right now, 17 beamlines are operational on Indus 2, which is a hard X-ray machine. And whatever I showed, 3 categories, all the 3 categories are taken care in this facility. And another important thing which I mentioned earlier, it is not a simple laboratory source or something. So it is a huge manpower investment and capital investment is there, and there are many institutes involved in building the beamline facilities. For example, morning you must have heard Dr. Ramjanay Chaudhary. So his institute has built 2 beamlines in Indus. For example, the soft X-ray absorption beamline, and another is in Indus 1. And similarly, Shah Institute of Nuclear Physics have built, and then of course BRC has built and RCAT has built. So it is basically a very collective approach to build such national facility. And so you can see here, starting from scattering waste to these are the absorption waste, and this is the photoelectron waste, and this is scattering. And these last 2 are basically for the diagnostic purpose, not for user purpose. So this is used, these 2, visible diagnostic and X-ray diagnostic beamlines are used mainly for the characterizing the beam parameter of the source, so that users get the good quality beam in the experimental station. Okay. So this is the listing of the various spectroscopic beamlines in Indus 1. As I told you, Indus 1 is a soft X-ray, or you can say UV source, since it has the electron energy of 450 mega electron volt. So this is the first source which was built in sometime in 2001, and these are the beamlines which are available. So, and all are for spectroscopic purpose. So first one is the high resolution maximal ultraviolet beamline, which is again for photoabsorption studies of atoms, molecules, and radicals. So studies which are related to the bonding, study of bonding or vibration studies, which are important for your environmental science, ozone depletion studies, all those things are used, or it can be also used for calibration of instruments for space mission project, which already we have, for the Mars mission, we have used this beamline. And then this is angle resolve for electron spectroscopy beamline for electron density of states and band structure in solids and surfaces. Again, this is a photoabsorption for atoms and molecules with a lower resolution, and this is infrared for high pressure and microscopic kind of studies at low temperature. And then again, this is a photoabsorption spectroscopic studies beamline for local structural studies. And this is again angle integrated photoelectron spectroscopic beamline for density of states. In the morning, you must have heard detail of this. And this is a reflectivity beamline for studying the optical properties of materials in thin film or multi-layer. So now coming more about the beamlines and its applications. So now I'll first take up the techniques which are based on scattering phenomena. And under this category, there are 6 beamlines, which is based on the scattering. And these are like angle dispersive, extreme condition energy dispersion, engineering application beamline, which has come very recently, and then protein crystallography beamline, a small and wide angle scattering beamline, and gauging incidence scattering beamline. These last 2 beamlines also have come very recently in this industrial facilities. So this is the engineering application beamline based on the X-ray diffraction or a scattering technique. So it is a versatile X-ray scattering and diffraction beamline for engineering applications. So you can use this beamline for any odd-shaped material. You can bring as it is for to carry out the studies related to engineering problems, which deals with the, for example, stress measurement and texture measurement and determination of elastic constants in variety of bulk as well as thin film samples. And its line profile analysis can be used for characterization of micro and nanostructural of the material. So this beamline is developed by RCAT and is the main contact person, Dr. SK Rai. This is the view graph of the beamline and the various facilities. This is the sample stage, which can handle up to 12 kg of the sample can be mounted on this for various characterization. And this is in the hard X-ray region that operates in 5 to 40 kV. Now coming to second category, that is extreme conditions XRD beamline, which involves both angle dispersive and energy dispersive. Of course, there are another beamline with the same application on BL12. So so both are same. So I will just picked up one beamline, BL11. And here you can see that, so here you can see that this two geometries which are possible on this beamline. So angle dispersive, in which basically the beam from the source is first made in a certain shape, desired shape by primary slit, and then we have a precision slit system. Then we have a monochromator, which is a channel cut monochromator, and then we have a focusing mirror, basically called KV mirror system. Basically nothing but it is a two orthogonally oriented cylindrical mirror. And so focused beam can be used either in this station or in this station. So when it is unfocused, it can be used for ADXRD station, and with the area detector, you can do the normal X-ray diffraction like we do with a monochromatic K alpha, copper K alpha. But we have a freedom here to choose any energy in between the 5 to 25 kV. And in energy dispersive mode, basically we use the beam without any monochromatization. So we bypass the monochromator here. So whole continuum beam, it is kind of Loy pattern, you can imagine. So we use the full radiation made to fall on the sample, and then the refracted beam from this powders is recorded by this area detector on the this station to record the energy dispersive XRD pattern. So these are the various facilities. So this you can see the high pressure setup for XRD. So any phase transition kind of studies can be done with this high pressure device. And so that's why this there is a very small quantity required, and the beam size kind of required is hardly 50 to 80 micron. So that's why synchrotron is very important, which otherwise are not possible in the laboratory source. So this can also mimic the condition what is there in the Earth crust. So in the Earth's crust, in what phase the material are there, that you can mimic and identify the possibility of what are the materials available in the Earth crust. Okay, so this is the facility where you can do operando XRD. Operando means, while the device is working, and then you can see what is happening. Let us say, for example, a battery. Now you want to see while battery is recharged or discharged, and what is the structural changes that can be probed online with this facility. And we have a high temperature setup, so we can go up to 1500 Kelvin, and any phase transition kind of studies can be done with this. And we can also do the grazing incidence XRD using a 2D detector. So if a thin film is there, you can find in plane and out of plane diffraction. So these are some studies which will just give you an idea. So this is, for example, a category on the thin film GI-XRD study. So, and since thin film is a non-equilibrium state, it is not like bulk, so it is having some strain on the top surface, and so both kind of stresses like tensile stress or the compressive stress can be determined. And this is the graph. The study on this sodium bismuth lanthanum titanate, which is for energy material. So there, with the doping, how the structure changes. For example, here we have observed there is a observation of octahedron tilt. So you can see this, there is a tilting. So this tilting has been observed by recording the XRD for various samples which are doped in different concentration. And so the details are there in this journal. And this is a high temperature XRD. So you can see with the rising temperature, the second peak is being vanished as you go high in temperature. So there is a dielectric phase transition in this material accompanied by the structural phase transition. This more detail will be in this journal. You can see there. This is the work on the using the high pressure device facility. So you can, this again, the phase transition has been observed in this material. So from here, this is the monoclinic phase. From monoclinic to, it has come to the what you call the triclinic phase under this 0.7 gigapascal pressure. And this is the operando XRD, that means on in situ studies on the rechargeable batteries, and see during the charging process how the study pattern evolves, and what the study has given a lead that during this solidation half cycle and perfectly electrochemically reversible upon desolidation. So it rules out the speculations which is there, it was there in literature earlier, concerning possible instability or irreversibility of this compound being, it was suspected to be a major cause of cyclic instability. So why certain battery doesn't last for longer? So this mechanism is still not understood. If people, once they understand by studying the in situ and the time scale of picosecond. So once you study that, then you can charge the battery for maybe a year. You don't bother for again recharging. So that is the kind of study requires such a bright source. Okay, so now I come in the scattering technique, which are dedicated only for macromolecular crystallography application. So this is the facility at Indus 2, and it is heavily booked this beamline. We have to wait at least for three to 4 months once to register for beam time. And these are this is the beamline view, and this is the station at this done, and this is the biochemistry lab. See, main bottleneck in this macromolecular crystallography is not only the source, requirement of bright source, but also requirement of a perfect single crystal or tiny crystal of the protein, for example. So that's why we have developed the RCS developed a biochemistry lab also for crystal growth facility, and user can also use this facility for growing the crystal before starting the experiment with the beamline. So these are some of the protein crystal structures, complex crystal structures which is not otherwise possible with the lab source. So these are some other results which are very applied in nature. For example, there is a crystal structure of human protein which provides insights into cystic kidney disease. See, after all, why you need to structure? Because it is like, you imagine, like lock and key. So if, let us say, key is your virus or lock is a virus, then you have to find a key, and key can be found if you know the structure of the lock. So it is like that. So once we know the protein structure, then you can, of the disease or virus, for example, COVID virus, so we can attack with a similar kind of protein which can bind its active sites. So this helps in designing the new medicine. So this is another example of which is applicable in neurological diseases. This is the type 3 proteins studied for related to iron uptake in cholera bacteria. And this is another for mechanism to know the termination mechanism in this Vibrio cholera. All these are published, and all over the world, people work on protein crystallography beamline. There is a data bank, and they publish there, and then biochemist people, they use this data for drug design. Okay, now I come to structural determination at a mesoscopic length scale. So far, you have seen all these structural probes are at angstrom level, I mean atomic level, for which you have used X-ray diffraction kind of technique. Now, the case you imagine, for example, this is the view graph you see here. This is called Tyndall effect. If you go in a hill station in early morning, you see this kind of scattering, which is basically small angle scattering from the macroscopic objects. So this is the macroscopic scattering. But at the microscopic level, this visible the light doesn't scatter, so we need X-ray. But here, the small angle scattering gives rise to a probe to probe the material in the nanometer scale. For example, in nanometer up to micron level. So you can study the precipitates, colloids, polymers, granules, virus, bacteria, etc. Whereas in the atoms in crystal is studied by XRD. So this is also very important technique also for nanomaterial study, which is your theme topic of today's this faculty development program. So, so what we can find out information from this small and wide angle scattering beamline. So we can find out the quantitative information about the particle size. So what is the size of the particle in this length scale? So this length scale is called mesoscopic length scale. And so this, and also you can find out the size distribution. So it may not be truly, let us say if it is spherical, now how good the spherical distribution is there, so that you can find out. And also you can find the interparticle distance. And this technique has a very wide application in the food industry, for example, in the milk product, yogurt, and tire industry, cement, and toothpaste, and whatnot. And this is one of the recent study done on evaporation induced structural evaluation of the laminar mesospace, a time to solve small angle scattering. So basically, how does water behave when trapped in nanometer size case that has been studied using the evaporation. So this is published in Journal of Applied Crystallography. You can see further detail in this. So it revealing the shrinkage in interplanar laminar restraints and disorder to order structural transition in the course of drying. You just leave it and let it dry. So with time, we do the small angle scattering and find out this. So this is the very latest edition technique which has been added in industry facility, and now it is available for users. Now this is another beamline which has been built by Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics. It is also based on gauging incidence scattering, and which is meant for studying the surfaces and interfaces in solid and liquid samples. Okay, so now it comes the application based on the imaging technique. So imaging is not a new to us by X-ray. In day-to-day life, we have been seen since the day of Röntgen, when he took the first X-ray photograph of her wife. Hence, you must remember that. And then from there, we have seen this hospital CT scan to your for this security body scanner, and then airport you see baggage scanner. But it has certain limitations. It is not sensitive to soft materials or tissues, and not only thick and highly dense objects can be probed with this. It can see features only larger than 500 micron, and it is very time consuming, and no imaging of dynamics or movement can be studied, and also it has those considerations. So what synchrotron provides a features up to 1 micron. It can be studied, and it can be studied in real time scale also in out of 10 milliseconds. Suppose something is being heated, and then you want to see the changes. And also it is sensitive to soft tissue. So you can do fast scanning out of 15 minutes. You can do the computer tomography and can see the thin materials, and also it is prone to less dose to the sample. So this is with this beamline also being under developed, and it is being developed in collaboration with the Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, for cancer studies of materials. So these are the example. For example, the kidney stone formation in humans have been studied for various patients of various symptoms have been studied, and this is the osteoporosis bone disease in a fish model, and this is the hip bone human bone disease study done, and this is a study on the aircraft composite material to find out any defects due to wear and tear. So now coming to techniques for, I have, how much time I have? Hello?
Yes, sir. You have.
I can continue.
Yeah, you have half an hour.
Okay, fine. So this is the techniques for spectroscopic applications, and so in this category, we have a technique based on hard X-ray, which be based on either X-ray fluorescence or X-ray absorption, and then we have a UV or soft X-ray based. And in this, there are various categories. It can have, excuse me, 1 minute. So, so it can be either in the low energy region, 4 to 11 eV, where we study the molecular or atoms for studying the electronic states in vibration states. Then the soft X-ray absorption in the energy region of 100 to 1200 eV, 55 to 800 eV. Then, of course, this is complement to the hard X-ray, which is available 5 to 25 kV. So basically, you can do here counter absorption, like so let us say if you have iron oxide, iron can be studied in a hard X-ray region, whereas oxygen can be studied in soft X-ray absorption to give a complete picture of the whole material. And then we have a technique in this energy region, UV soft X-ray region, which is based on photon in and photon electron out type of experiment, which is photon electron spectroscopy, or it can be reflectivity. And then we have a 35 to 1000 eV, which is the newest edition, and it is angle resolved based on the insertion device that is undulator based for high quality experiment. Then we have a beamline with 100 to 1500 eV for reflectivity and absorption experiment. So first I take up the hard X-ray based spectroscopic methods, and under this I take first the X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, which is basically for the compositional characterization of material, and which is otherwise not possible for very dilute sample or for samples of very environmental application. And this basically is due to the fact that when you sign the material with photons of sufficient energy of, let us say, monochromatic energy, and then it can knock out, for example, a K electron, and so the whole system is in excess state, and then it de-excites and gives rise to either the X-ray fluorescence, or it can give a non-radiative kind of transition like Auger or a thermal heating, etc. So normally this technique is not new. It is available in the laboratory source using the either radioactive source or the sealed X-ray tube, but it has certain limitation, and limitation is on 2-3 fronts. The first is that, for example, if you want to study the X-ray fluorescence of the low Z element, for example, boron, carbon, oxygen, or element below iron. For example, in this graph, this is the fluorescence and Auger yield, and this is the atomic number. So you can see this is the K cell fluorescence yield, which is increasing as you increase the atomic number, and it is the highest if you go for example, uranium, it is almost 1, below 1. And so below iron, it is less than, it start decreasing. I mean, it is less than 50. So somewhere below calcium, it is nothing. So there are disadvantages that for lower element, the yield itself is very low. So you will not get sufficient fluorescence signal to count for that element. And on the contrary, there is another limitation. There is no source available, suitable source available, which can excite selectively for this element. Plus, also the source available is not very bright. Okay. So on that ground, now the synchrotron becomes very handy because it is a tunable. So you can tune to any wavelength, any atomic number, since it is bright. So whatever disadvantage is there due to low fluorescence yield, that can be compensated by a bright source like synchrotron. And since it is polarized, so as I mentioned you earlier in the first slide, that it can lead to better signal to noise ratio, as the scattering background due to scattering is almost flat and minimized. So, and plus, apart from this, using a suitable optics, I mean, smart optics, I mean, and the detection facility, you can study use the facility either in terms of wavelength dispersive X-ray fluorescence, either in the terms of energy dispersive, or in terms of total X-ray fluorescence technique. These are just variant name based on the geometry of the instrument. Ultimately, it is X-ray fluorescence. So with this kind of source and advantages over the optics and detection, you can go to parts per billion kind of or few femtogram kind of level of concentration you can study with this. So these are the features which is summarized here. So use of polarized using the polarized beam synchrotron at selected beam energies, we can efficiently excite a particular element in the whole matrix. So background is very low, so you can go to PVV level, or because of high brightness and good optics, it also provides capability for a smaller sample, or you can do microprobe. So you can do spatial mapping of the sample. Let us say if I take some leaf or onion leaf and I want to map, let us see how some toxic element from the roots travel and come to the that level, the leaf level. So, and also it is sensitive for low Z and elemental imaging. So, which leads to these various science, biological, pharmaceutical, environmental, archaeology. So, archaeology is also very popular using XRF. So, for example, if you want to detect whether it is a duplicate painting or it is an original painting. So, this is the geometry of the beam line. So, this is a normal, you can see this is the source, and then we have a concrete shielding wall, then we place the slit, and then a double crystal monochromator. This is a very important element of the beam line. In all the hard X-ray beam line, this DCM will find for getting a very precise monochromatization of the photon energy, photon beam. And then we have a secondary slit for precise controlling the beam size. And then we have a focusing mirror, Then we have a focusing mirror, which is called KV mirror. So it is basically two orthogonally oriented cylindrical mirrors to focus the beam in the around less than 6 micron or so. And this is a sample scanning stage. So you can scan either in Z or horizontal scan to map the sample, elemental mapping you can do. And this is the another setup here, which can be used for reflectivity measurement. And so kind of microforce beam is available here, 4.4 to 7 micron, and this is the energy range you can get. So you can get all kind of K fluorescence and L fluorescence line of this beam line to composition analysis. So this, for example, the NIST sample where they have shown that the detection level, you can go to PPV level using this facility. So this is the experimental station. So you can see the detector, energy dispersal detector, and the focusing device, and the sample, and this is the testimony to show that microprobe analysis can be done using the X-ray fluorescence. So, for example, this is a copper grid which is used in TEM, and that has been imaged by just merely counting the selectively copper K alpha fluorescence, and by scanning in that plane, XY plane. And so this shows that you can do the imaging with the resolution of kind of C23 micron. This is the dia, and the space is 61 micron. So this kind of spatial resolution, we can use this beam line. So major application is bulk elemental. You can do where focus beam is not required, and where you can also do microprobe, where you need a scanning of multi-elemental analysis in a ppm level with 5 micron resolution. You can do in total reflection mode for ultra-trace analysis in femtogram region. Then you can do the grazing incidence X-ray fluorescence spectrometry. You can do selectively induced X-ray fluorescence emission. That means wavelength dispersion you can do, and you can do also absorption contrast X-ray imaging. So now the spectroscopy technique. And now I come to the UV and soft X-ray radiation region, where we have two kind of facility where you can do photon in and photon out experiment, and other is photon in and electron out of experiment. So this is the UV or low energy region, 4 to 11 keV, and in the video you have seen the oxygen ozone layer depletion study. That kind of studies can be done, or any environmental molecules. See, for example, here this is SOCl2 molecule, which is a environmental active molecule, and this is the spectra of a thin film. So if you are find out the any defects. So you can use this beamline for transmit spectra in this energy region. So samples studied in this beamlines have been, many data of these beamlines have been deposited in this international database, which is useful, which is called the spectral database for Atlas for gas molecules for atmospheric interest. So many astrochemistry, astrophysical users, group people, they use this data. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this also being used for detector calibration for a Mars mission program. You use this high resolution ultraviolet beamline for H2 and D2 validation. Okay, so this is the hard X-ray based and UV based X-ray experimental setup available on the Indus facility. So basically, it is kind of photon in, electron out of kind of experiment. So there are 4 facilities. Two are in the Indus 1, and which you might have heard in this today's lecture by Dr. Anand. So this is angle-resolved photoelectron spectroscopy, and this is angle-integrated photoelectron spectroscopy beamline. Both are almost same energy range of 10 to 200 eV. So this is BL2, and this is BL3. And this is the hard X-ray based PES, which was not possible earlier before synchrotron. So this has another advantage, and this is set up at Indus 2, which is under BL14, and this is the newest edition, which is a undulator based, 3rd generation source based angle resolved photoelectron spectroscopy beamline, and for the electron density states studies. Okay, so just I'll just brief. So what is so special about PES using synchrotron? Although we know synchrotron is a very old technique. Photoelectron spectroscopy is old technique, and which is based on the photoelectric effect, which was in 1905 discovered. But it took almost you can say 3-4 decades to come up with this technique, which was discovered by K. Sigman, named as ESCA, because of non-availability of various technology like vacuum science and all. So, and this is the energy conservation on which this technique works. So we have a kinetic energy is given by the this H photo energy, and this is the binding energy, the work function. So as you know, kinetic energy from this experiment, and we know the photon energy, exciting energy, you can find out the binding energy from which you can find out the composition of the material. So with availability of synchrotron source, since we have got continuum, so we can do from UV to hard X-ray. So which leads to basically tuning of the surface depth, which is not possible with the conventional source. And not only that, we can also do newer variety of experiment like angle resolved photoelectron spectroscopy, constant initial state spectroscopy, or the resonant photoelectron spectroscopy. I think this must have introduced by Dr. Ramdanai in his talk. Then it has surface tunability. Why surface tunability? Because as you know, this is the graph which shows this is the x-axis is the electron kinetic energy, and the y is the electron mean free path. So you can see this is kind of in EV. So if you have an electron kinetic energy around 50 eV, so it is hardly sensitive to within angstrom. So we can probe only 5 to 6 angstrom atomic layers in the sample. But if you can increase the kinetic energy, and how you can increase the kinetic energy? By increasing the exciting radiation. So for example, if you go to hard X-ray, you will see you can probe at this level. You can go more than tens of angstrom. Let us see if I give 10 kV, I think this portion is masked by this picture. So because of this analogy, this mean free path consideration, we can, using the tunable source, we can use the for surface tunability. And because of high brilliance, we can do high brilliance. You can do the high resolution photo emission. You can do also mapping, imaging using this technique. So finally, it leads to a spectroscopy of buried interfaces. So if you have a heterojunction, so you can do the interface study. Then you can do elemental composition of nanomaterials. chemical state information you can get, thickness can get band offset values for heterojunctions, which is required for optoelectronic device, and you can do band structure by ARPS. You can also find the topological properties of surfaces or thin films like the functional material like a topological insulator, etc. So this is the, I told you ARPS, the new variant of the PES, which has been popular due to the synchrotron source. So apart from in the normal PS, what we do, in normal PS, we just find out the kinetic energy. Now, apart from kinetic energy, if you can find out the momentum, or if you can find out the direction of the ejection of the electron, so you can find out the momentum. So knowing the momentum energy, you can know the distribution of electronic states in the matter. And why it is required, because it is very important in the functional materials like, let us say, topological insulator, semiconductor, or superconductor. All these govern, or any functional material based on like this ferromagnetic material. So for that reason, we need a brighter source, because now we cannot afford in this normal PS study, we count all the electrons which is coming in all directions. So we get average information of the surface. The moment we tune to, analyze, we put a detector with angle resolution of 0.1 degree. That means we can count the electrons only with a 0.1 degree resolution. So it becomes a directional sensitivity. And from this, we can get the momentum. And this requires basically a single crystal or oriented sample thin film for getting the E versus K. So basically, we get a band structure, and how it is done, basically, as you know, since at the surface there is a symmetry is breaking, and so the K parallel component of the momentum. So for example, you imagine if this is the electron coming out in certain direction, so I can resolve it in the perpendicular and the parallel direction. So this parallel component is conserved. So only the perpendicular component is not conserved, and this is determined from this English-Zoll experiment, and which is used for coming out of this surface. So the parallel component is same, which is it is available in from the experiment outside the experiment, as and also in the inside the sample. So for K parallel is we get this from this equation, and for K perpendicular we get from this equation that K perpendicular is basically a function of theta and also the V0. So in this right side we know the kinetic energy from the experiment, and we know the angle direction, so we know the momentum. And if you know the potential of the crystal by any experiment or by some simulation, you can find the K perpendicular. And using these both components, we can map the electronic structure. And how we do it? So basically, we using the continuum source, we record this valence band of the sample as a function of h nu, and you get a series of spectra, and each peak corresponds to one momentum of this. So like that, we get a EK diagram of the sample, and which is useful for the electronic studies of various functional materials. So this is the facility at the Indus One beamline, and though as I already mentioned, this is the information we get, and this is the kind of facility we overall resolution, that is in the terms of milliards volt, it is 140. So we can get the information near the Fermi edge, and the vacuum required or available is 5 to the minus 11 millibar. And we have a in situ, recently we have added a in situ MD-Arc laser based pulse deposition system, which is connected to our beamline chamber. So what you can do, you can in situ deposit the film in this chamber, and without breaking the vacuum, by using this transfer rod, you can transfer this in this analysis chamber for in situ characterization of the sample. This is the view graph showing the application of another continuum source where we have done the constant initial state spectroscopy on this iron aluminum alloy system. So this is just to show you that how vacuum is important in situ for some experiments. So you can see the black curve. Here is the thin film deposited under this PLD system, and it was transferred without breaking the vacuum in the analysis chamber. And you see there is no carbon contamination, it's flat. But after 40 hours, there is a slow growth of the contamination. So we cannot afford to use XC2 experiment for certain experiment, and whole thing transfer can be done in 12 minutes so that you get enough time for doing the experiment. So this is, for example, one example for in situ PS measurement for finding out the valence band offset of this heterojunction. So in this case, we have done PS measurement on HFO2 thin film, then gallium doped zinc oxide thin film, and a heterojunction of gallium doped zinc oxide and HFO2 heterostructure, which is deposited in situ by PLD using this third harmonic. And these three films has been used for recording the core level as well as the valence band. And using this core level of the hafnium and the valence band, using this formula, we have determined the valence band offset. So this is the band diagram which has come out from this study. And this is more result is there in the NIMSE. This is another study on the nanomaterials, which is basically a terbium doped cerium phosphate nano particles for photoluminescence, and there we wanted to avoid objectives, avoid cerium 4+. So you can see here in this study we have used various techniques under the synchrotron using PES, X-ray absorption, small angular scattering, XRD to characterize our sample. So, for example, this is the survey spectra of XPS, and this is the core level high resolution spectra. And here you can see this shows there is a cerium 4+ and cerium 3+, and predominantly it is cerium 4. But we were not convinced because we had annealed this under N2 environment, so we were expecting there should not be any oscillation. So what we did, we suspected maybe the outer surface is oxidized and may not be bulk. And that was confirmed when we did this X-ray absorption here is a structure by hard X-ray beamline at Indus 2. And there we could find that this is the spectra of the showing the pure CePO4 spectra, and this is the terbium doped CePO4, and along with these +3 standard. So we have seen clearly that there is no trace of cerium 4+ in this spectra which is required for photoluminescence properties. Okay, this is another example of ARPS. Just quickly, I will. So this is on the studies done on the single crystal of CAG2GE2 to understand the electron structure of the system using the synchrotron source at our beamline. And so you can see this is the photoelectron spectra which I was explaining in the slide of ARPS. So various photon energies we have recorded in spectra, and these are the various possible states, electron states A, B, C, D, E, F, which is there in this spectra, and these peaks have been deconvoluted and then it has been plotted in the spectra, and it has been compared the theoretical simulation, band structure calculation. So these are some other recent experiments using this beamline, and there are some recent publications which has come up on scientific reports and vacuum. Recently we have done on topological insulator. Okay, now this is anyway I have explained more or less this hard X-ray PS part. So this is the beamline BL14, which is available in Indus 2, which can be used for you can say relatively bulk compared to conventional photoelectron spectroscopy, either doing with the aluminum K alpha or magnesium K alpha. And the major reason, which I was telling you, is this, because of this is the universal curve called kinetic energy versus the mean free path. So we can tune, let us say if I tune the 15 keV, so I can go to 10 nanometer kind of. Whereas in normal, if you tune the photo energy of the soft X-ray, you can go down to 2 or 3 nanometer. So with this, many studies are being carried out, and this beamline is also heavily booked for experiment which is being done on various thin film or bulk samples to know the compositional or chemical state of the sample. This is the Engel-Usual photoelectron spectroscopy beamline, which I already gave some idea. And this beamline is the newest edition. And you can see compared to BL3, which is Indus 1, it has more energy range. So we can go to from 30 EV to 1000 EV. So we can go to more bulker region compared to Indus 1. And not only that, plus resolution is also better here. So 20 millielectron volt. For some studies which require very high resolution near the Fermi surface, for example, high-T superconductor kind of study, it can be done with this beamline. And the kind of facility, we have a lead in the propulsion chamber, so we can do the surface characterization of the single crystal or doing the ARPS, and SPS can be done with the 1000 EV source. So this beamline has been developed by RCAT, and these are the contact persons there. So I come to the conclusion now. So what I intend to get information from this talk in that is the importance of synchrotron radiation and how it is generated basically. So it is generated when the velocity of electron moving in a curved path approaches the velocity of light. So this is the synchrotron radiation, and modern synchrotron source contains the unrelated nuclears to enhance the synchrotron radiation emission, and it has unique characteristics, and which has led to many modern applications, and it provides a large number of beamline at Indus, which is based on scattering, absorption, and imaging based. And finally, I would like to just introduce, just to bring home that how one can use this facility. And first of all, there is no charge. There is no charge for using this facility. It is a national facility, and moreover, the students can get to and fro second AC or third AC train fare depending upon the JRF or SRF, and sometimes faculty also can get the travel compensation. And for using this facility, you can first register under this website, and once you register, then with your registered username ID, you can select any of the beamlines either under the Indus 2 or Indus 1. So all the 15 beamlines you can see here and can be chosen, and you can upload your experiment. And except for few beamlines, for example, like ZAPs and protein and XPS, most of the other beamlines you can get maybe in a month or two, but these beamlines sometimes it may take 3 to 4 months because of large number of samples. So with this, I must thank you all for having a very patient hearing, and I thank you once again, the organizer, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. So I would like to have now questions. If I hope I have taken complete in time.
Yeah, it's okay. Complete. Thank you very much. I'm now requesting Dr. Arun Kumar to just take over that if there are some questions. Sir?
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Is there any question? Any question?